Hello, everyone, and welcome again to another Teacher Joseph podcast. Today, we're going to talk about the knife angel. Its full title is the National Monument Against Violence and Aggression, and this is a very large sculpture created from 100,000 knives created by the artist Alfie Bradley and the British Ironworks Centre, which is somewhere in England. Now, let me tell you a bit about this because it's fascinating. So, you probably have heard that in America, they have a problem with gun crime. Here in the UK, you might not know that we have a problem with knife crime. Now, this is something which is not quite so serious just yet, but the figures are rising rapidly. And there are certain areas of the country, including parts of London, where knife crime is really on some kind of pandemic scale. I don't quite know how we got to that point, but that's the way it is. Now, the police, in order to deal with this, they have something called Amnesty Days. An Amnesty Day is when you can take your knife to the police, give it to them, and there'll be no questions asked. And to create this sculpture of the knife angel, the police handed over many of their knife bins. Okay, so up and down the country, there's 200 knife bins, and the police emptied those and gave them to an ironwork in order for this sculpture to be produced. Now, this statue of an angel, as you can imagine, is covered in blades. It's created from blades. And it looks really, really beautiful. Now, I have to say, I don't really like British art, okay? But this knife angel really is a huge angel. It is 27 feet tall, 8.2 meters tall. And it says here that knives seized by the police were handed over, and some of those still had bodily fluids on their surface. And the victims of knife crime, so these blades, these knives, many of them were used to kill people. The families of the victims were invited to write messages on the blades. Now, I'm looking at a picture of the knife angel. It's this huge statue of an angel. And the one thing which I'm noticing is the face, because it's a beautiful, beautiful piece of art. The face looks like it's in pain, or at least in some kind of deep thought, which really makes this statue quite astounding. And the sculpture was created to highlight knife crime in the UK and to educate young people on the harmful effect violent behavior has on communities. Because as I've mentioned many times before on this podcast, Britain was very industrial, and then it changed to be some kind of support center for industry that was offshored. And now we don't really have a lot of industry. So a lot of our post-industrial areas never recovered from that. So we have whole areas of the UK which just died. There's no work. There's remnants of old industry. Like in my town, for example, there was a huge car factory, there were textile mills. The buildings are all still there. The government's done a good job of converting them into shopping malls and office space, but there's no work. So many of our young people, they go to study and then they leave the areas. They have to. So many of these areas never recovered, and there's a lot of social problems like alcoholism, knife crime, and other things. And the farther you go outside of London, the clearer and more obvious crime becomes. So this sculpture was created to highlight knife crime, and it tours the country. So they move it up and down the country, and they also give talks in local schools about this statue. Now, I have to say, it's really beautiful because it's made up completely of blades. If you find a copy of this on Wikipedia, of course, it has its own Wikipedia site, or if you find a picture of it somewhere, you can see it if you just put into Google the knife angel. This thing is made up completely of knives, and the ironworks helped to transform these knives into something which could be used to create a sculpture. Families who lost loved ones as a result of knife crime were invited to have a message engraved onto a blade. And 80 families did this, apparently, and there must be thousands upon thousands of blades in this thing. Yeah, 100,000, as I mentioned earlier. Um, Yeah, so it was completed in 2018 and it's been going around the UK, but I don't think it's ever been to my part of the UK, and I really want to see it, which is why we're talking about it today, because I was looking at the calendar for the Knife Angel for 2024, but it doesn't appear to be coming here, which is unfortunate. It's just left a place called Walsall and has gone to another part of England. But really, it's so beautiful. I mean, I don't particularly like British art. I don't think we do that very well. But this sculpture, because of its history and because of the expression of emotion on its face, it's powerful, absolutely powerful. So of course, it has its Wikipedia site, and I'm just looking now at the Ironworks website, and they're saying uh, about the families that contacted them and how over 250,000 knives were removed from the streets for the angel. And they're saying that they employed sculptor Alfie Bradley to bring the angel to life. He created a structure to form the basic shape of it. And then they started welding each blade to the angel. To weld is when you have two bits of metal. And the variety of knives and weapons the police had collected, they say, was really astounding. There were standard kitchen knives, pocket knives, Swiss Army knives, samuri swords. Is that how you say that? Samuri. Which reminds me, there was a delicious restaurant in Reading called Samuri something or other. It was delicious. But anyway, yeah, knuckle dusters. That's those things, those metal rings you put on your hand, isn't it, on your fingers, and martial arts weapons. And what was alarming was that the police even handed over homemade weapons. And they go on to talk about how building and developing the angel's face because its hands are outstretched, almost like it's looking for forgiveness or some kind of reparation or maybe even absolution. I don't know, but it's looking beautiful, absolutely beautiful. The facial expression, apparently, which they were trying to convey to us, is the angel is asking why. So it's got its arms outstretched and it's saying why. Truly a beautiful thing. I mean, you really need to see this. And yeah, they wanted it to have the right emotion. Um, some of the blades were inscribed with messages of disbelief at just how bad knife crime is here and why it's not really been addressed. And this knife angel is going around the UK. I remember it was in London, I think about a year ago, but I don't know why it's not done the whole of the UK, or maybe I've just missed it. But do have a look and see what you can find just by putting into Google the knife angel, because this thing, wow, is all I can say. Um, the figures are out about Christmas, and 1 in 4 British people admit to working on Christmas Day because they didn't want to see their families. And also, uh, many British people say that they didn't want to spend money on petrol over Christmas to save money, so they didn't visit their families. So 1 in 4 said they worked because they didn't want to face Christmas. 1 in 4 also said that they didn't want to visit their family because it would cost them money. 3 out of every 10 British people say their mental health goes down at Christmas and that the last Christmas it was particularly bad. That's 3 in 10 British people say their mental health nosedives. If something nosedives, it goes down. Okay, think of the nose of a plane, which, if it's going to hit the ground, is going to be pointing downwards. I think some planes actually have a nose pointing downwards anyway. 2/3 of Britons, said that they wanted to spend less just before Christmas there. And 47% of British people said they were very stressed over Christmas dinner. The number of people who were home alone at Christmas went from 4% up to 8%. Wow, that's quite a big figure, isn't it? And 68% of British people said they would prefer to receive a useful gift rather than a traditional gift. Yeah, I think it's a really depressing time for everyone, and I went out the day after Christmas, the 26th of December. It was really sad. I mean, I think I made a podcast on that day, but I was in a coffee shop, surprised it was open, and there were all these middle-aged men sitting alone who really looked very depressed, staring into their coffee, and there were others with their laptops just trying to get on with life. I think, we've really been held to ransom over Christmas for some time. That just means that there's been a lot of emotional blackmail. Many of us just can't deal with it, and I know that I try to make the best of it, but I don't like it. And as I get older, um, I'm learning how to switch off to it. But yeah, it's a horrible, horrible time. Um, and this year, on a positive note, they say British people spent a record 4.8 billion on groceries during Christmas. uh, and 12 million British people, it says here, uh, spend spent their festivities at a place they call home rather than leaving. Oh, interesting. Actually, someone got me a set of crampons for Christmas. If you don't know what that is, it's these metal frames, and you put them on your shoes to walk on ice. Very nice. They're like traction boots, they're grips, so that you put them on your shoes and you can walk on the ice without worrying about falling. But of course, they also tear up the tarmac in the road, so you have to be careful with them. And finally, even though British people love Christmas, they drink even more than usual. And many of our local governments are now using pea paints, because the problem is you drink so much and then you leave the building, leave the pub, and you forget to use the bathroom. And therefore, many British younger people, probably older people as well, they just find a quiet alleyway or lane and they urinate in it. So the government, to try to stop people doing this, is using anti-urination paints. And what that does is I don't know how it works, but if you try to urinate on this paint, it immediately will throw it back at you. You will be covered in the stuff. I don't know how they do it. It's some kind of anti-urination paint. But if you pee on it, if you urinate on it, it will be thrown back at you and you will be covered in the stuff. They have that around here, and they also have, I saw a notice the other day, anti-climb paint. And the sign said, "Do not try to climb this building. It's been painted with anti-climb paint." Yeah, like I was really going to climb the building anyway. It was a strange notice. And there we are. So that's it from me today. I hope you've enjoyed this. But if you get the chance, please do have a look at the knife angel. A very beautiful thing. And I'm just thinking, do you know what it reminds me of? Do you remember that game we had as kids called Woolly Willy? It was basically a bald head on a piece of paper covered by a bit of plastic, and it had bits of iron inside it. And as you moved the magnetic pen around, you could put hair and a mustache on it. Do you remember that? Willy Willy? It was just a picture of a bald headed guy, and with these clips of iron that were stuck inside it, you moved them with a magnet, and it created a hairstyle for him. It was, depending on what generation you came from, you might remember that because it's been around since the 1950s. It was like a very early Etch-a-Sketch, if you remember what that was. It was like a screen that you could draw on long before the days of computers. That's it from me. Enjoy your day. See you all. Bye.